Hey everyone, today we will be having the discussion of communication process. Hope you bear with me as I discuss to you the different definitions of communication, the elements of communication, and different frameworks on how we can have effective communication. From a t-shirt statement, I hear you but I'm not listening. So let's contemplate. Are there times in your life that hear sounds, you hear messages, you hear people speaking, but at the end of the conversation, you cannot grasp what the message is all about. So, yes, there would be times that we tend to hear, but we cannot understand. And if there's no understanding, can we tell ourselves, am I really listening? So that would be the point of the discussion of how effective communication can be achieved and how can we make our listeners understand what we are speaking or saying. Hope that you enjoy and learn a lot from listening to this talk. Once again, for us to have effective communication, let us first ask ourselves. Number one, what does it mean to listen or speak effectively? Number two, how do you know when you are not being listened to or ignored? Number three, what do you do when speaking to get your point across? Number four, how do you speak to an elder, superior, friend, or group of people? And number five, why is good or effective communication important in our personal and work lives? So, as we progress with the discussion, you will be acquainting yourselves on different pointers on how we could have effective communication and why it's important that we monitor if people are still listening to us. So it is not just you speak and speak and speak a lot, but then there would be times in your speech that you have to know if your listeners are still on you. And that's the framework of how effective communication is. And later on, you will also be acquainted with different elements and how important feedback is. Let us first define communication. Communication is the transmission and receiving information, feeling or attitudes with the overall purpose of having understood, producing a response. So the definition is clear. Communication happens when you are able to give a message and that information is being received. Not just information, but there's a feeling, an attitude, and your purpose is for you transmit something on your receiver or the person hearing the information. And you will know that communication is effective or happening if you can get a response because your listeners were able to understand what you are saying. That's why there would be tendency that people tend to ask, did you get what I'm telling? Did you understand what I'm saying? Because they want to clarify whether the message that they have sent is being received with understanding. And the response of yes or any affirmative responses would validate the question if they are being understood. And that's what makes communication really effective. Yes, communication happens when message was sent, received, and was understood. So it is clearly exemplified by the illustration here. There are two people pretending that they are having a telephone conversation using data, or they can join with a string. Somebody is speaking, as you can see on the illustration, and someone at the end is listening to the message. So communication really happens there. It is not just a transmission of message, but if the person on the other side of the line is responding to the message sent by the person speaking, it means that communication. It explains the elements of communication. So we have here six important elements of communication, and we can say that each part is really important for us to have a complete cycle of effective communication. So first, let's begin with the sender. It refers to a person who initiates and transmits the message. The sender is also called encoder in some references. When you say encoder, the one who begins the conversation, or the one who constructs the message first. Then we have the message itself. It refers to the information, opinion that are directed to a target. So it means it is the actual message transmitted by the sender. So it is being expressed by the sender. Then we also have the signal. It refers to sign that symbolize message content. It is not just the oral, it is not just the one being spoken, but there are other information encapsulated in the message. So we have the signal, or those nonverbal cues that will give meaning or vivid message or vivid information to what sender really means. Then when the message is being transported, it will be going to a channel or a route through which the information will pass. It could be in the form of visual, auditory, or the tactile senses that will also make the message flow. Then, if the message is being transported through a channel, it can be interfered with noise or other disturbances or anything that could affect the message. Then it will be received by the decoder, or simply the receiver. Receiver is the perceiver or the interpreter of the message, the person whom message is being transmitted to. And we know that the communication or the message is being successful or successfully given if the receiver can give appropriate feedback. So when we say feedback, it is the message returned to the sender. So it's the information relayed from later to earlier stage. And it will help the reader or the sender to validate if the message being given earlier has been understood and given appropriate response. And as you can see on the diagram here, yes, we always start with the sender, and the message is being interfered or intersected given the context. For example, they are having their conversation in a crowded place, therefore, they are surrounded by noise, and that is the context of the conversation. So it might be affected, the sender's message might be affected by the noise as the receiver gets the message. And yes, after the receiver gets the message, there's a feedback, and the sender will know if the message is successfully sent, if the feedback is appropriate. So that's if the message is broken or not being heard or interpreted correctly, then misunderstanding would arise. And that makes each element of communication really important for us to make it an effective one. Communication process. Communication begins the sender thinking about what to include in the message. The message is encoded in a medium and conveyed using a channel. The receiver or audience decodes the message. The receiver sends a feedback, which is evidence of the message being communicated successfully or unsuccessfully. The original sender then receives the feedback and the loop closes. Now we know how communication process happens. Now let's have communication skills. Communication skills are vital to a healthy, efficient workplace. Often categorized as a soft skills or interpersonal skill, communication is an act of sharing information from one person to another person or group of people. There are many different ways to communicate, each of which play an important role in sharing information. Now we know already the different things to remember when we communicate, and we are gradually developing our communication skills. We can use it at work, we can use it at school, we can use it on different places wherein we wanted to convey whatever we wanted to do. And also, when you have that communication skills, this is one of the things that will help us achieve our goals. So we can complete tasks, we can do things that we think should be done by means of interacting not just with yourself but with others as well as um, large crowd. So that what makes us human. We are able to have that communication skills to accomplish our goals. That's why it's really important in information sharing. Let's now have the two types of communication. We have here the verbal and the nonverbal. As you can see on the chart or on the graph, verbal communication only takes 35%, while the nonverbal communication is the more prevalent as it takes 65%. It includes facial gestures, voice inflections, movement of body parts, clothing, body posture, and eye contact. It means that even when you are not speaking, you are still communicating through your body language. So let's formally define verbal and nonverbal. First, verbal communication is the use of language to transfer information through speaking or sign language. It is one of the most common presentations or types often used during presentations, video conferences, and phone calls, as well as meetings and one-on-one conversations. Verbal communication is important because it is efficient. It can be helpful to support verbal communication with both nonverbal and written communication. When you say verbal, it has something to do with Conversing. So you are producing oral communication. You are speaking, or these are things that can be perceived through the mouth. Unlike the nonverbal communication, usually or most of the times, it's the use of body language, gestures, and facial expressions to convey information to others. It can be both intentionally and unintentionally. For example, you might smile unintentionally when you hear a pleasing or enjoyable idea or piece of information. Nonverbal communication is helpful when trying to understand others' thoughts and feelings. And as I told you earlier, nonverbal communication would take 65%, while verbal would take 35%. So even we're just sitting in just a corner, we can nonverbally communicate through body language, gestures, and facial expressions. Now it's your turn to identify the types of communication embedded in this picture. So we have here 8 characters. Two are speaking with each other and maybe discussing something about a certain data or information that they have. The other one is talking to somebody in a phone. The 3 characters here are looking on something. The other one is holding a phone. The other one is looking at the laptop, and the other one is staring at the person speaking. And we also have here 2 guys. The other one is having a coffee. The other one is listening. So if you would create a dialogue that would give life to this picture, what do you think would be the flow of the conversation? Do you think they have effective communication? Which one is showing um, effective communication and which one is not? So it's for you to decide. We do not know if these kids are brothers and sisters or just playmates. But as shown here, most are of body language. First one, we have the vocal tone and inflections, facial expressions, pointing, eye contact, as well as the gestures. So, considering the following body language, what do you think is a conversation of the kids? Are they arguing on something or are they talking about what they have that day? Are they fighting? Are they sharing on something? So it's up to you as well to tell if the 2 kids are having fun while they are uh, talking with each other. This is another activity for nonverbal communication, and your task is to imitate the different facial expressions and to tell what emotion or what hidden message is embedded by each facial expression. And that's all for today. And thank you so much for listening. And see you again for the next discussion on effective communication. Thank you so much once again. This is Dr. Goodbye and mabuhay.